Welcome back to our cozy forest adventures. Join Hazel, Brindle, Pip, and Finn as they embark on a brand new journey through the woods, discovering surprises, friendship, and tiny magical moments along the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming forest tales. Sweet dreams and happy listening. Stories from the Woods. The Lantern Festival. The morning sun spilled gently over the meadow, washing everything in soft golden light. Hazel the rabbit stretched at the door of her burrow and breathed in the fresh spring air. The dew sparkled on the grass, and a light breeze carried the smell of blooming flowers. Somewhere nearby, a blackbird sang a bright tune, as if it was welcoming the day. Hazel's whiskers twitched with excitement. Today was not just any day. Today was the first day of preparations for the Lantern Festival, a gathering held once each year when the forest animals celebrated the coming of summer. It was a time of light, laughter, and sharing food under the stars. She hopped down the path toward the old oak tree where her friends had agreed to meet. Pip the squirrel was already there, scampering about with a bundle of twigs and paper tucked under his arm. "Hazel," he called out, his bushy tail flicking happily. "I've been practicing folding lanterns. Look, this one even has little holes so the light makes patterns when it shines through." He held up a small round lantern, and Hazel's eyes widened. "That's wonderful, Pip. It looks like stars caught in a ball." Finn the frog soon arrived, balancing a basket filled with lily pads and reeds. "These will be good for floating lanterns," he explained in his calm, deep voice. "When they drift across the pond, it will be like the night sky resting on water." Brindle, the old badger, came last, carrying a heavy sack over his shoulder. He set it down with a grunt and wiped his brow. "Candles," he said simply. "Made them myself. Enough for every lantern." The friends sat together under the oak, the sunlight dappling through the leaves above. Hazel's heart swelled as she looked at them. She loved how each one brought something special, how they worked as a family though they were different. As they began their preparations, the air filled with the rustle of paper, the creak of twigs, and the murmur of cheerful voices. Pip chattered away, cutting and folding shapes. Finn hummed softly as he wove reeds. Brindle tested each candle carefully, nodding with satisfaction when the wax burned evenly. Hazel, who was quick with her paws, tied string to each lantern and checked that they hung straight. Every so often, she stopped to look around. The meadow shimmered with movement, bees buzzing, grass swaying in the breeze, butterflies fluttering from flower to flower. The forest felt alive, as though it too was eager for the festival. When the sun rose high, Pip clapped his paws. "We can't work on empty stomachs. I've brought chestnut cakes my aunt made." He pulled out a little tin, and the smell of sweet nuts and honey filled the air. They sat in a circle, sharing the cakes and laughing as crumbs dusted their whiskers. Finn licked his fingers and said, "If the lanterns turn out half as good as these cakes, the festival will be perfect." Brindle chuckled, his deep voice rumbling. "The lanterns will shine. But don't forget, the best part of the festival is the feast. Everyone brings their best dish. Last year I remember someone made a cheese wool so creamy it nearly melted in the sun." Hazel's ears perked up. "I'll make something too," she said. "Perhaps little pies with berries and cream." She imagined her friends biting into the flaky crust and smiled. The afternoon drifted by as gently as the clouds in the sky. By the time the sun began to lower, a neat pile of lanterns lay beside them, ready to be lit when the festival came. Hazel felt proud. Their paws were tired, but their hearts were light. As they packed their things, a soft wind stirred the meadow, carrying with it the smell of mint from a patch growing nearby. Hazel closed her eyes, breathing it in. It was the smell of freshness, of new beginnings. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll start planning the feast." The others nodded eagerly, their eyes shining in the golden light of the setting sun. The first day of preparations had ended, and already Hazel could feel the promise of something wonderful. The next morning, Hazel woke early. The sky was soft with the colors of dawn, pale pinks and gentle golds melting into blue. She stretched, washed her whiskers quickly, and hurried out into the clearing. A thin mist clung to the grass, cool and wet on her paws. When she reached the oak tree, Pip was already there, tail twitching impatiently. "Hazel," he said. "You won't believe what I found. There's a patch of wild strawberries near the stream. Perfect for your berry pies." Hazel's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. We'll pick them today." Finn arrived next, carrying a bundle of herbs. "Mint, thyme, and parsley," he explained. "The feast needs flavor. And I thought perhaps we could dry some to hang in lanterns, so they smell sweet when warmed by the candlelight." Brindle appeared last, slow but steady, with a wooden crate balanced on his back. He placed it down carefully and opened it to reveal blocks of cheese wrapped in cloth. "Made with clover and meadow herbs," he said. "The mice shared them with me. They want everyone to enjoy." Hazel's nose twitched. The smell was sharp but rich, making her mouth water. "The feast is going to be wonderful," she said softly. Together, the friends walked to the stream to gather strawberries. The forest was alive with sound, the chatter of birds, the hum of bees, the rustle of leaves in the wind. Hazel hopped ahead, her ears flicking as the others followed. When they reached the stream, sunlight danced on the water, and the strawberries glowed bright red against their green leaves. Pip darted forward, stuffing one into his mouth before anyone could stop him. Juice dribbled down his chin, and he grinned. "Sweet as honey." Finn shook his head but smiled. "Try not to eat them all before Hazel bakes her pies." They picked strawberries until their baskets were full, their paws stained red with juice. Hazel licked her fingers, the taste tart and sweet at once. She thought of the pies she would make, golden crust, soft cream, and the strawberries on top. As they rested by the stream, Brindle pulled a small jar from his pocket. "Honey," he said simply, unscrewing the lid. He passed it around, and each friend dipped a strawberry into the golden syrup. The mixture of flavors, sweet honey, tart berry, made them all sigh with delight. "Food," Pip declared, licking his paws, "is what brings us together." Hazel smiled, watching the sunlight sparkle on the water. He was right. That afternoon, they gathered in Brindle's den to plan the feast. The old badger's home was cool and comfortable, with shelves carved into the earth walls. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, filling the air with a comforting smell. They spread their finds on a low table: berries, herbs, cheese, jars of honey, and bundles of nuts. Hazel carefully sorted everything, her mind already spinning with recipes. "We'll need bread," she said. "Something to share, something warm." Finn nodded. "I can bake flatbread on stones by the fire. If I press herbs into the dough, it will smell lovely." Pip tapped his chin. "I'll make nut tarts. My paws are quick enough for that. And I'll bring chestnuts roasted in sugar." Brindle leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "I'll prepare a stew. Something hearty, with roots and beans. It will keep everyone full." Hazel looked around at her friends, her heart warm. It will be a feast to remember. As they worked, Hazel noticed the small touches in Brindle's den: tiny carved wooden figures on the shelves, an old lantern hanging from a hook, jars of jam lined neatly in rows. Brindle caught her looking and gave a small smile. "My mother taught me to keep food ready," he said. "Jam in summer, root vegetables in autumn, grains in winter. That way, no one goes hungry." Hazel's chest tightened with respect. She loved how Brindle carried old wisdom like a steady flame. When evening came, they lit one of the finished lanterns and set it in the center of the table. Its glow spread softly over their faces as they shared bread and cheese, talking of the festival to come. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, carrying the promise of tomorrow. The next day was bright and warm. Birds swooped in the sky, and the air smelled of pine and fresh grass. Hazel and Pip decided to gather more berries, while Finn and Brindle went to find roots for the stew. Hazel hopped lightly through the meadow, a basket balanced on her arm. Pip darted between bushes, his tail flicking as he stuffed berries into his paws. "You're supposed to fill the basket," Hazel teased, watching him sneak another bite. Pip shrugged with a grin. "One for the basket, one for me." They laughed together, the sound blending with the wind in the grass. Hazel loved these moments, simple, playful, filled with the warmth of friendship. When they returned, Finn had found carrots, onions, and wild garlic. Brindle had dug up fat parsnips and turnips. Together, they washed the vegetables in the stream and set them aside to dry. That evening, they tried roasting a few pieces over the fire. The smell filled the clearing, sweet carrots, sharp garlic, earthy parsnips. Hazel closed her eyes, breathing it in. "This," she said softly, "smells like home." The days passed quickly as the festival drew near. Lanterns were strung between trees, their colors bright against the green leaves. The meadow began to look magical, glowing with soft light even before the sun had set. Hazel worked hard on her pies, rolling dough and whipping cream. Pip helped, though he snuck more than one spoonful of cream when he thought no one was looking. Finn baked bread, his flat rounds golden and crisp, sprinkled with herbs. Brindle's stew simmered slowly, filling the air with the smell of roots and spices. One afternoon, as Hazel carried a tray of pies to cool by the window of her burrow, she paused. The sunlight streamed in, catching the golden crusts and making them shine. She felt a swell of pride. She thought of everyone gathered together, sharing food and laughter under the glow of lanterns. It made her heart beat fast with joy. As the sun lowered, painting the sky in orange and purple, the friends gathered once more by the oak tree. Their work was nearly done. Tomorrow, the festival would begin. Hazel looked at each of them, Pip, Finn, Brindle, and whispered, "I think this might be the best festival yet." They all smiled, their faces lit by the soft glow of a lantern, as the first stars began to appear above. The night before the festival, Hazel could hardly sleep. She lay in her burrow under a quilt patched with soft fabric scraps, the faint smell of lavender drifting from a sachet tucked into the corner. The wind sighed gently through the trees outside, and now and then a cricket chirped, but Hazel's mind buzzed too loudly with thoughts of the next day. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of lanterns floating like stars above the meadow, of tables heavy with pies and bread, of music and laughter echoing through the forest. At first light she was awake again, stretching her paws and smoothing her fur quickly. She hurried outside, and the morning air was cool, tinged with dew. The sky glowed faintly pink, and the grass sparkled like glass in the sunlight. Pip was already there, of course, leaning against the oak tree with a berry tart half-eaten in his paw. "Couldn't wait," he said with a grin, crumbs clinging to his whiskers. Hazel sighed, though her eyes softened with amusement. "Pip, if you eat all the food before the festival, what will everyone else eat?" "Don't worry," Pip said, licking his paw. "There's plenty left. And besides, someone has to test everything for poison, right?" Just then Finn emerged from the undergrowth, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it to reveal thin slices of warm bread, steam still rising from them. "Morning," he said, voice gentle as always. "I thought we could have breakfast together before the busy day." Hazel's nose twitched at the smell. The bread was soft, sprinkled with herbs, and glistened faintly where a touch of butter had melted into the crust. She tore off a piece and sighed happily as it melted in her mouth. perfect," she murmured. "You always get the herbs just right." Brindle appeared last, carrying a small kettle hooked over one paw. He set it down, filled it with stream water, and lit a little flame beneath. Soon the smell of mint and chamomile rose from it, soothing and bright at once. The four of them sat together beneath the oak tree, sipping the warm tea, nibbling on bread and berries, and watching the forest wake. Birds sang in high, cheerful voices. A soft breeze carried the smell of pine and damp earth. Sunlight spilled slowly across the meadow. For a moment, Hazel felt as though the festival had already begun. As the day warmed, the meadow came alive with activity. Word of the festival had spread through the woods, and animals of every kind began to arrive to help. Squirrels scampered up trees to hang lanterns on high branches. Hedgehogs rolled baskets of apples into neat piles. Field mice carried bundles of herbs, their squeaky voices rising in cheerful chatter. Hazel, Pip, Finn, and Brindle bustled among them, guiding and helping where they could. Hazel set up long wooden tables, spreading simple linen cloths across them. Pip ran back and forth, carrying jars of honey and pots of jam, though he paused often to dip his paw into one or another when he thought no one was watching. "Pip!" Hazel scolded, catching him with a pawful of raspberry jam. He grinned, unbothered. "I'm just making sure it's sweet enough." Finn kneaded dough by the stream, pressing wild rosemary into the top of each loaf. The smell drifted through the air, warm and savory. Brindle, meanwhile, tended a large pot that bubbled slowly, filled with carrots, turnips, beans, and herbs. Every so often he leaned down to stir, humming softly as steam curled around his nose. Hazel couldn't resist dipping a spoon in. The broth was rich and hearty, the garlic sharp but softened by the sweetness of carrots. "Oh, Brindle," she said softly, "this will keep everyone happy long into the night." The badger smiled, though his eyes twinkled. Food tastes better when shared. By late afternoon the tables were heavy with food. Pies golden and round, nut tarts glistening with honey glaze, loaves of bread stacked like little hills, jars of jam in ruby and amber shades. Wheels of cheese sat proudly at the center, their creamy scent filling the air. Hazel stood back, paws on her hips, her heart swelling with pride. The lanterns swayed gently overhead, their colors glowing even before the sun had dipped. Everything was ready. The festival began as the sun slid behind the treetops, painting the sky in deep orange and violet. One by one, the lanterns were lit, and the meadow filled with golden light. It was as if stars had descended to rest among the branches and grass. Animals gathered from every corner of the forest. Rabbits, hedgehogs, voles, squirrels, owls, each carrying something to share or simply eager to join. Their voices rose in laughter and song, mixing with the crackle of the fire and the gentle whisper of the evening wind. Hazel moved among them, offering slices of pie and plates of bread. Everywhere she went, smiles bloomed. Pip darted through the crowd, quick as ever, calling out jokes and balancing trays of nut tarts with surprising grace. Finn played a soft tune on a wooden flute, the notes floating like moths in the warm air. Brindle ladled out steaming bowls of stew, his deep voice steady as he asked each guest how much they wanted. The smell of food filled the meadow, sweet strawberries, sharp cheese, herbs baked into bread, honey melting over roasted chestnuts. Lantern light glowed on happy faces. Hazel's heart swelled until she thought it might burst. When her paws grew tired, she sat on a log near the fire, nibbling at a wedge of cheese. She leaned back and let the warmth of the flames wash over her, the sound of laughter and music wrapping around like a blanket. "This," she whispered to herself, "is what the woods are meant to be." As the evening deepened, music grew louder. A pair of squirrels played fiddles, their bows darting quick as lightning. A family of hedgehogs clapped their paws in rhythm, and even the owls hooted in time. Soon animals were dancing in the firelight, rabbits hopping in quick circles, mice spinning in pairs, Pip darting between them all with reckless joy. Hazel found herself laughing so hard her sides ached. She let herself be pulled into a circle of dancers, her paws moving clumsily at first but then falling into rhythm. The ground was cool beneath her feet, the lanterns swayed above, and the night air smelled of crushed grass and sweet wine. At one point she stumbled into Brindle, who had finally left his stew pot to join the fun. He chuckled deeply and steadied her. "Careful, little hare," he said. "Don't let the music carry you away." Hazel grinned up at him. "I might not mind if it did." Later, when she slipped away to catch her breath, she found Finn sitting quietly at the edge of the meadow. He had set his flute aside and was watching the lanterns with soft eyes. Hazel sat beside him, nibbling at a biscuit someone had left on a plate. "Why are you out here?" she asked gently. Finn smiled faintly. "I like watching. Seeing everyone happy, that's enough for me." Hazel followed his gaze. The meadow glowed like a dream, full of laughter and light. She sighed, leaning her head back. "It's perfect," she whispered. Near midnight, the festival reached its peak. A long table was cleared, and all the food that remained was laid out again, this time for one final shared meal. Animals gathered close, their faces flushed from dancing, their voices warm with cheer. Hazel sliced her last pie, setting the golden wedges neatly onto small wooden plates. Pip poured out mugs of spiced cider, grinning as foam dribbled down his chin. Finn passed around loaves of bread still warm from the fire, and Brindle's stew was scraped from the pot until not a drop remained. The meadow was quiet for a moment as everyone ate, the only sounds the crackle of the fire, the rustle of leaves in the night breeze, and the gentle clink of spoons against bowls. Hazel tasted a bite of bread, soft and fragrant, followed by a spoonful of stew, rich and filling. She closed her eyes, savoring the warmth that spread through her belly. When she opened them again, she saw lanterns swaying above, their light catching in the eyes of her friends. Pip was telling some wild story, Finn was smiling quietly, Brindle was leaning back with contentment, and all around them the forest folk looked happy and safe. Hazel breathed deeply. The air was cool now, filled with the sense of food and smoke and grass. She felt tired, but it was the best kind of tired, the kind that comes after a day of giving and sharing, of laughing until your chest aches, of knowing that everyone you love is near. "This," Hazel whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "is what I always dreamed of." And as the final lanterns flickered gently in the night wind, Hazel knew the memory of this festival would shine in her heart for many seasons to come. The morning after the festival was quiet, as though the forest itself had decided to rest. Dew clung to the grass, and the air was cool and clean, washed by a soft night breeze. Hazel woke late in her burrow, blinking at the faint light filtering through the small round window. Her paws felt heavy, but her heart was still light. When she finally stepped outside, she found Pip sprawled on the roots of the oak tree, his tail twitching slowly. His eyes were half shut, and a faint smile played on his face. "You look like you've been up all night," Hazel teased. Pip yawned, stretching his paws high. "I wanted to watch the lanterns burn out." The last one drifted away just before sunrise. It was beautiful. Finn joined them a little later, padding softly along the path from the stream. He carried no basket this time, only a reed tucked behind one ear. "The pond was still this morning," he said quietly. The sky was painted across it, and the air smelled of pine. It felt peaceful. Brindle was slower, but he appeared too, his thick fur slightly ruffled. He lowered himself onto a stump with a deep sigh. "My bones are old," he muttered, though his eyes shone kindly. But the festival was worth every ache. They sat together, saying little, the silence filled with the distant chatter of birds. Every so often a breeze stirred, shaking loose a few petals from the meadow flowers. Hazel closed her eyes and listened, to the hum of bees, the creak of the oak branches, the soft scurry of a vole in the grass. For a long while, they simply rested. Later that week, Hazel suggested a walk to the northern grove. "We've been so busy with the festival," she said, "we've hardly seen the rest of the woods. Let's go and breathe in the quiet places again." So they set out together, the path winding between tall beeches whose leaves whispered in the breeze. The sun flickered through the branches, scattering patterns of light and shadow over the ground. Every so often a butterfly drifted past, its wings catching the sun like shards of glass. Pip darted ahead, climbing up and down trunks, calling back about mushrooms or shiny stones he found. Finn walked slowly, stopping often to look at a flower or listen to the rustle of reeds near a stream. Hazel kept close to Brindle, who leaned on a sturdy stick but never complained. When they reached the grove, it was just as Hazel remembered, quiet, green, and still. Tall willows swayed around a little pool, their branches trailing the water like fingers. The surface shimmered, broken now and then by a dragonfly's wings. "This," Finn whispered, "is where I come when I want the world to feel soft." They spread themselves on the grass, letting the sun warm their fur. Hazel watched the sky through the branches, a patchwork of blue and green. A breeze sighed through the leaves, carrying with it the faint sound of the stream far away. Brindle leaned back and closed his eyes. Pip, restless as always, tried to balance on a willow branch before tumbling into the grass with a squeak. The others laughed until their sides hurt. And for the rest of the afternoon, they did nothing more than breathe and watch the world turn gently around them. As summer deepened, small tasks called them back to the rhythm of everyday life. Hazel gathered herbs for drying, tying them into neat bundles that filled her burrow with soft scents. Pip helped, though he was more interested in hanging the bundles at odd angles just to see how long they would stay. Finn mended the small bridge over the stream, carefully weaving reeds and wood so it would hold strong for the rains. Hazel and Pip carried sticks for him, while Brindle directed from the bank, pointing out where the supports needed to be stronger. It was steady work, the kind that left paws tired but satisfied. The forest hummed with life around them, the buzzing of bees in the wildflowers, the coo of wood pigeons in the canopy, the far-off bark of a fox. Sunlight played over the water, bright and rippling. When the bridge was finished, they all stood back together. Hazel tested it first, stepping carefully across. The wood creaked but held firm. "Perfect," she said, her ears twitching happily. Finn only nodded, his eyes calm and proud. Pip bounced across in 3 leaps and shouted, "See!" Strong as a boulder, before tumbling into the grass on the other side. Brindle chuckled. "Strong enough for us, at least. That's all that matters." One evening, while the sun dipped low and the sky turned soft with colors, Hazel heard a knock at her burrow door. It was Brindle, holding something wrapped in cloth. "I was tidying my store," he said, "and I thought of you." Inside the cloth lay a small wooden lantern, carved carefully with simple shapes of leaves and stars. It wasn't new, the edges were worn smooth with age, but it glowed with a quiet kind of beauty. Hazel touched it gently, her eyes wide. "It's lovely." "It was mine when I was young," Brindle said. His voice was softer than usual, almost like a whisper. "I used to bring it to every festival. I think it should belong to someone who will carry it forward." Hazel's heart tightened in her chest. She looked up at Brindle, seeing the lines of age around his eyes, the steadiness in his gaze. She felt a warmth rise in her throat, the kind that came from knowing someone trusted her deeply. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but full. Brindle smiled, a slow, gentle smile. "Take care of it." And he turned to leave, his heavy steps fading into the evening. Hazel held the lantern close, feeling the weight of it, not just in her paws, but in her heart. The days grew long and warm, the kind of days where the air shimmered above the grass and the forest was filled with the sound of humming insects. Hazel carried the lantern everywhere, hanging it in her burrow by day, and sometimes lighting it at dusk just to watch the glow fill the room. Her friends noticed, of course. Pip teased her, calling it her treasure light, while Finn simply nodded whenever he saw it, as though he understood without needing words. Brindle said nothing, but Hazel caught him watching once, and in his eyes she saw quiet pride. One afternoon, as they sat together by the stream, Pip asked, "Do you think we'll keep doing this every year? The festival, the lanterns, all of it?" Hazel looked at the water, at the sunlight glittering on its surface. She thought of the meadow filled with laughter, of the quiet grove, of the lantern that now belonged to her. "Yes," she said firmly. "As long as we have each other, we'll keep the light burning." Finn smiled, Brindle nodded, and Pip grinned so wide his whiskers nearly bent. The breeze stirred, carrying the scent of wild thyme and cool water. Hazel leaned back in the grass, watching the sky. The forest felt whole around them, alive, steady, filled with quiet promise. And she knew, in that moment, that the woods would always be home. The heat of summer began to soften. Mornings grew cooler, with mist curling low over the meadow, and the sun lingered less each evening. Hazel noticed the first leaves turning pale at the edges, and she felt a quiet thrill in her chest. Autumn was coming. One morning, Pip came racing down the path, nearly tumbling over his own tail. "Hazel! Hazel! You must come see." She hopped quickly after him, with Finn and Brindle joining along the way. Pip led them to a clearing where a tall sunflower patch stood. The flowers were so high that even Brindle had to tilt his head back to see their golden faces. Bees drifted lazily from one bloom to another, their hum filling the air. "Look," Pip said, climbing up one stalk with ease. He pointed to the heavy heads, bending low with seeds. "It's like treasure. Enough for winter and more." Brindle chuckled, steadying the stalk as Pip scrambled down. "You've got sharp eyes, squirrel. If we gather carefully, we'll have plenty for everyone." So they set to work. Hazel used her nimble paws to pluck seeds, Finn wove small reed baskets to carry them, and Brindle carried the heaviest loads with ease. The seeds rattled as they poured into baskets, a sound that was oddly satisfying. By the time the sun began to dip, their baskets were full, and the patch looked tidier, the tall stalks swaying gently in the wind. Hazel sat down, wiping her brow, and looked at her friends. Their paws were dusty, their fur tousled, but their eyes were bright. "It feels good," she said softly, "to gather now, knowing we'll be safe later." The others nodded. Above them, the sky turned soft shades of rose and lavender, and a cool breeze stirred the grass. Summer was slipping into autumn, and Hazel could feel the woods shifting with it. A week later, the four friends decided to explore a part of the forest they rarely visited, the old birch grove on the eastern edge. It was a long walk, but Hazel loved how the silver trunks glowed even from afar. The path there was quiet, lined with ferns that brushed their ankles and mushrooms that peeked shyly from fallen logs. Birds flitted above, their wings quick flashes of brown and gold. Pip bounded ahead as always, calling out whenever he found something interesting, a hollow stump, a shiny pebble, a patch of moss shaped like a heart. When they reached the grove, Hazel gasped. The birch trees stood tall and graceful, their bark white and peeling, their leaves trembling like tiny coins in the breeze. The ground was soft with fallen leaves, even though autumn had barely begun. "It feels like another world," Finn whispered. His voice was hushed, as though he didn't want to break the stillness. They wandered between the trees, their paws crunching softly on the leaf-strewn ground. Brindle pointed out claw marks high on one trunk, old and faint. "Fox, long ago," he murmured. Pip found a hollow where a birch trunk had split, and inside was a perfect little pool of rainwater, clear and cool. He dipped his paws in with delight, splashing until Hazel squeaked and darted back. As the day faded, they lay on their backs, looking up at the pale trunk stretching into the sky. The leaves shimmered above like thousands of little lights, whispering in the wind. Hazel felt very small, but also very safe, surrounded by friends and trees that had stood for generations. When they left, she glanced back once. The grove seemed to glow in the dusk, silver and soft, as though it was keeping a secret just for them. By early autumn, the forest had changed its colors. Gold and copper leaves lined the paths, and the air was crisp and carried the smell of apples and damp earth. Hazel loved walking in the mornings, when the mist still clung to the ground and every spiderweb gleamed with dew. One such morning, Brindle suggested they gather firewood for the colder nights to come. "It's not glamorous," he said with a smile, "but it's needed." So they set out with baskets and ropes, searching for fallen branches and dry sticks. The work was steady but pleasant. Pip climbed trees to shake loose twigs, laughing as they rained down. Finn carried armfuls of reeds and smaller branches, weaving them into tidy bundles. Hazel gathered kindling, humming softly as she went. Brindle, with his strength, carried the largest logs, though Hazel noticed he paused more often than before. She walked beside him, offering small sticks to balance his load. He grunted, pretending not to need help, but Hazel saw the gratitude in his eyes. By the time they finished, they had neat piles stacked by each burrow. The sight of them gave Hazel a warm, steady feeling. The nights could grow as cold as they wished, the forest folk would be ready. That evening, as the first stars came out, Hazel lit Brindle's old lantern in her burrow. Its glow filled the small room, casting gentle shapes of leaves and stars across the walls. She sat under its light, her paws wrapped around her knees, and whispered to herself, "The woods will be safe this winter." As the days grew shorter, the friends began to notice flocks of birds flying overhead. Long lines of geese stretched across the sky, their calls echoing far above the trees. Hazel always paused to watch, her ears lifted, her heart tugged by the sight. "Do you ever wonder where they go?" she asked one afternoon, as they sat together near the pond. Finn followed the line of birds with his calm gaze. "Somewhere warmer. Somewhere far." Pip tilted his head. "I'd like to go someday. Imagine flying so high, seeing the whole forest below like a map." Brindle chuckled, his deep voice soft. "The ground suits me well enough. My paws were made for the earth, not the sky." Hazel smiled, though she felt a curious ache in her chest. She loved her burrow, the oak tree, the meadows and streams, but a small part of her wondered what it would be like to wander, to see the places beyond the hills. The thought stayed with her long after the birds had vanished from sight. One evening, the wind picked up, rustling through the branches with a restless sound. Hazel stood outside her burrow, watching leaves spiral down in golden showers. The air smelled sharp, full of change. Soon after, Pip came running, fur ruffled, eyes bright. The wind knocked down a branch near the pond. Big enough to sit on, like a raft. Hazel's ears perked. "A raft? Come see." She followed him with Finn and Brindle trailing behind. Sure enough, a heavy branch had fallen into the water, and it floated gently near the bank. Pip hopped onto it at once, swaying but grinning. "See? A raft," he shouted. Hazel laughed, though her paws twitched nervously. "Be careful." But soon she climbed on too, holding Pip's paw for balance. Finn joined them, steady and calm, while Brindle remained on the shore, shaking his head but smiling all the same. The three of them drifted a little way out, the branch rocking gently. The water rippled around them, reflecting the fading light of sunset. It felt strange and exciting, as though the pond had become an ocean and they were sailors on a grand adventure. Hazel's heart beat fast, not from fear but from delight. The cool air, the gentle sway, the laughter of her friends, it all wove together into a moment she knew she would never forget. When they finally returned to shore, Brindle offered his paw to steady them. "You three," he muttered, though his eyes twinkled, "will be the end of me." Hazel only laughed, her fur ruffled by the wind, her spirit lifted high. Autumn was here, and though the world was changing, she felt ready for whatever came next. Frost touched the meadow for the first time that year. Hazel noticed it as she stepped out of her burrow in the early morning, her paws crunching lightly on the grass that glittered in silver. Her breath puffed in the cool air, and she hugged her cloak a little tighter around her shoulders. The forest looked different under frost. Every branch wore a delicate edge of white, and even the smallest spiderweb shone like crystal. Hazel couldn't help but stop and stare, her nose twitching at the sharp scent of frozen earth. She wasn't the only one awake early. Down by the pond, Finn was already at work, arranging reeds into a pattern that looked both strong and neat. Hazel padded over. "Morning," she said softly. Finn looked up, his dark eyes calm as always. "Morning, Hazel. Frost is early this year." Hazel nodded, kneeling to help him. Together, they wove reeds into mats. "What are these for?" she asked. "For the burrow floors," Finn explained. "The ground will be colder soon. This will keep paws warm." Hazel smiled at the thought. "That's clever." By mid-morning, Pip arrived, his cheeks stuffed with acorns, and Brindle followed soon after with a bundle of dried herbs over his shoulder. They all sat by the pond, their breaths rising in white clouds, and worked together. Hazel noticed how their paws moved with ease, how their voices blended with the wind in a soft rhythm. The frost didn't feel so sharp then. The cold was softened by their laughter and the warmth of being side by side. One bright afternoon, Pip burst into Hazel's burrow with a wild look in his eyes. "Hazel! You must come right now. You won't believe it." Hazel blinked, brushing leaves from her fur. "What is it this time?" "Apples," Pip said, his tail fluffing in excitement. So many apples, all on the ground, red as berries and sweet as honey. Hazel's ears perked, and soon she was following Pip along the path, with Finn and Brindle joining them halfway. They came to a small orchard on the edge of the forest, where the trees were heavy with fruit. Many apples had already fallen, rolling in the grass like shiny jewels. Hazel picked one up, biting carefully. Juice ran down her chin, and she laughed. "Oh, Pip, you were right. These are perfect." The friends gathered apples together, filling baskets and pockets, rolling them down the path like playful balls. Brindle carried the heaviest loads, though even he chuckled when Pip tried balancing 3 apples on his head at once. When they returned to Hazel's burrow, they laid the apples out in neat rows. The air filled with their sweet scent, and Hazel's little home felt warmer, brighter. They shared a few slices then and there, the crisp crunch echoing through the burrow. As evening came, Hazel sat by the lantern, looking at the baskets of fruit lined up against the wall. She thought of the months ahead and felt peace settle in her chest. The forest might turn cold, but they would not go hungry. The wind grew sharper each day, sending more leaves tumbling down. One morning, Hazel awoke to find the great oak nearly bare, its branches black against a pale sky. She felt a pang of sadness, but also a kind of beauty in the change. That day, the 4 friends decided to prepare their winter nests. Brindle gathered moss from shaded stones, thick and springy. Pip darted about collecting soft feathers left behind by birds. Finn wove reed mats into tight circles. Hazel herself lined her burrow walls with dried grasses, layering them until the room smelled of summer fields. When they finished, they visited each other's burrows in turn, admiring the work. Pip's nest was stuffed so high with feathers it looked like a cloud. Finn's was tidy, every piece woven in perfect pattern. Brindle's was large and sturdy, smelling faintly of herbs. Hazel's was soft and golden, with her lantern glowing in the center like a star. They all curled together in Hazel's burrow at the end of the day, testing the warmth. The little room was filled with their voices and the rustle of leaves. Hazel thought of how lonely winter could be if faced alone, and how different it felt now, with friends so close. A thin layer of ice formed on the pond overnight. Pip discovered it first, rushing to show the others. Look! The water has turned to glass. The four of them gathered at the edge, peering down. Their reflections looked back, wobbly but clear. Pip tapped the surface with one paw, and the ice cracked faintly. He squeaked and hopped back, tail bristling. Brindle laughed, the sound deep and rolling. Careful now, little one. It's strong, but not strong enough yet. Finn leaned close, tracing a paw along the frozen edge. It will be, soon. Then we can walk across. Hazel tilted her head, imagining it. Walking on the pond instead of around it, it felt like magic. For now, though, they contented themselves with sliding pebbles across the ice, watching them skitter and spin. Pip's went the farthest, and he crowed with delight. The air grew colder as the sun dipped, and Hazel wrapped her cloak tighter. The ice shimmered in the fading light, like a sheet of silver spread across the pond. It was a quiet moment, but Hazel felt it settle deep inside her. Change was here, and it was beautiful. Snow came at last, soft and silent. Hazel woke one morning to find her burrow dimmer than usual, the light outside muffled. She rushed to the doorway and gasped. The world was white. The meadow stretched smooth and endless, the oak's bare branches capped with snow. Every path, every stone, every hollow was hidden. The air was sharp and clean, and the silence was so deep it felt like the forest was holding its breath. Hazel's paws sank into the snow as she stepped out. It was cold, yes, but soft, like walking on clouds. She twirled once, laughing. Soon Pip came bounding, his fur dusted white, his nose pink. Snow. Snow everywhere. He dove headfirst into a drift, popping out with a squeak. Finn followed more slowly, his steps careful, his eyes wide with quiet wonder. Brindle trudged last, shaking his head, though Hazel could see the smile hiding in his whiskers. They spent the day together in the new snow. Pip rolled balls until they were nearly as tall as him. Hazel lay on her back, moving her paws to make patterns. Finn built tidy walls of snow blocks, and Brindle carved a path through the drifts, grumbling but secretly pleased. When the sun set, the snow glowed blue and silver under the rising moon. Hazel stood still, watching her friends laugh and tumble, her breath puffing in the frosty air. The forest had changed once again, but with them together, she felt no fear. Only joy. The snow stayed, covering the forest in white. Days passed where the sun only peeked weakly over the horizon, and nights stretched long and silent. Hazel grew used to the hush of it all, the way footsteps were muffled, the way every sound seemed softer, wrapped in snow. Inside her burrow, life was warmer. The reed mats Finn had woven, the moss Brindle had brought, the feathers Pip had gathered, all kept the cold away. A lantern glowed golden in the middle of the room, throwing gentle shadows across the walls. Most mornings, the four friends gathered at Hazel's place. They would bring little things to share, dried berries from Pip, roots from Brindle, reeds from Finn, herbs from Hazel's stores. They would tell stories, voices mingling with the crackle of the small fire. Hazel loved these mornings best, when the outside world was quiet but inside was filled with laughter. One day, Pip suggested something new. "Let's build a hill," he squeaked, his tail flicking. "A hill?" Hazel asked, puzzled. Pip grinned. "Out of snow." Then we can slide down it." Hazel laughed, but soon enough, they were outside, shoveling snow into a mound. Brindle did most of the lifting, pushing great scoops with his strong paws. Pip scrambled up and down, patting it flat. Finn smoothed the sides with careful swipes, and Hazel gathered sticks to mark the path. By afternoon, they had made a tall, neat hill. Pip went first, squealing as he slid down on his belly. Hazel tried next, the cold rushing past her whiskers, laughter bubbling in her chest. Even Brindle, after much grumbling, gave in, and though he tumbled halfway, he came up smiling. The day ended with the four of them sprawled at the bottom of the hill, tired but happy. The snow glowed pale in the moonlight, and their laughter lingered in the frosty air. Winter pressed on. The forest paths disappeared under the snow, and sometimes Hazel wondered if they'd ever see green grass again. Yet even in the cold, there was beauty. On clear nights, the stars glittered sharp and bright. Hazel would stand at the entrance of her burrow, gazing up until her paws went numb. She thought of how big the sky was, how many stories it must hold. One such night, Finn joined her. "You like the stars," he said softly. Hazel nodded. "They make me feel small. But also, safe. Like we're part of something bigger." Finn hummed thoughtfully. "The pond reflects them when it's not frozen. In spring, we'll see that again." Hazel smiled. The thought of spring warmed her more than the lantern. The next day, Pip brought a surprise. He had found a hollow log and hollowed it further, shaping it into something like a drum. "Listen," he cried, tapping it with his paws. A deep, steady sound filled the burrow. Brindle chuckled. "That's clever." They all took turns. Finn tapped gently, Hazel in a steady rhythm, Pip in wild bursts. Brindle added a deep thump, and soon their little band filled the burrow with music. Outside, snow fell silently, but inside, the sound of friends echoed bright and strong. As weeks passed, food became scarcer. Hazel noticed her baskets were half empty now, the apples wrinkled, the roots fewer. Pip frowned at his acorn stash, and Brindle checked his herbs with a worried sigh. One morning, Brindle suggested they pool their stores. "Together, we'll have enough," he said firmly. Hazel agreed at once, and soon their supplies were gathered in her burrow. The space smelled of apples, nuts, herbs, and dried reeds. It felt safe, like a small market under the earth. Still, they were careful. Meals grew simpler, warm broth from Finn's reeds, roots softened over the fire, a few berries shared between them. Hazel noticed they ate slower now, savoring each bite. One evening, Pip looked glum. "I miss the meadow picnics," he sighed. Hazel reached over, patting his paw. "They'll return. And when they do, we'll make the biggest picnic yet." The promise lit Pip's eyes. Even Brindle's whiskers twitched in a smile. That night, as the snow whispered outside, Hazel dreamed of the meadow, green, bright, and full of flowers. She dreamed of laughter and sunlight and the taste of fresh strawberries. She held on to that dream, knowing spring would come. The cold reached its deepest. Snow lay high, and the pond was solid ice. Yet even then, the forest had gifts. One morning, Finn led them to the pond. "Watch," he said, placing a paw on the ice. Beneath, faint lines sparkled like silver threads. "Air trapped in the water," he explained. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Hazel knelt, eyes wide. The patterns were like tiny stars, frozen underfoot. Pip pressed his nose to the ice, squeaking in delight. Later, they discovered small shoots pushing through near the oak, stubborn against the frost. Hazel knelt to touch one, her paw trembling. "It's starting," she whispered. Brindle rumbled low. "Spring is near." That evening, excitement buzzed in Hazel's burrow. They spoke of planting new herbs, of gathering berries, of swimming in the pond once more. Pip chattered about climbing trees, while Finn described the return of dragonflies. Hazel's heart swelled with hope, the air already smelling sweeter in her mind. At last, the snow began to melt. The meadow reappeared in patches, green pushing through white. The pond cracked and groaned, water shining between the ice. Birds returned, their songs breaking the long silence. Hazel woke one morning to sunlight streaming into her burrow, warmer than it had been in months. She stepped outside, her paws sinking into soft, wet earth. The air smelled of new growth. She wasn't alone for long. Pip bounded up, squealing at every flower bud. Finn arrived, quiet but smiling, his eyes soft. Brindle came last, carrying a bundle of fresh shoots. Together, they stood under the oak, its branches tipped with green. Hazel looked at her friends, her chest warm. "We made it," she whispered. They decided to celebrate. They spread what little food they had left, a few apples, some herbs, a handful of acorns, and shared it in the meadow. The ground was damp, their paws muddy, but the joy was bright. As the sun set, painting the sky gold, Hazel felt tears prick her eyes. Winter had tested them, but it had also bound them closer. She knew, without doubt, that no matter the season, they would always have each other. And so the story of that winter ended, with friends side by side, laughter rising into the fresh air, and the promise of many seasons yet to come. The end. Thank you for joining Hazel, Moss, Brindle, Pip, and Finn on their adventure. If you enjoyed this story, check out our channel for more magical forest tales and cozy adventures waiting just for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back soon for the next story.